We are standing on High Point on Kupernoff Island, the Lindenberg Peninsula, and the scene you see behind us here is representative of what has been repeated throughout the forest from the central Tongass southward. It's called modified landscape.
And look at the wildlife recommendations. No concern, no concern, no concern, no concern.
David Beebe and Rebecca Knight are part of a group fighting to end industrial timber sales in the Tongass National Forest. I was joining them to document the aftermath of one such timber sale.
See that?
Yeah, that's outside the unit boundary.
We were driving down the road and noticed these stumps well off the road into a cutting area that wasn't marked on the map, on the record of decision map for the Tonka timber sale. Man, oh man.
Yeah, this is red cedar. Well, these are really close annular rings. 1, 2, 3, 4. 38 in the first half inch. 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. 81 years per inch. An easy 1,000 years, if not well over that. On national forest land of the Tongass, there are only two players involved, Viking Lumber and Alcan of Transpac Group. They're not going to bid on a sale that they can't make money off of. If you would compare it to a commercial fishing operation that I would run, I would have the taxpayer pay for my fuel. I would have the taxpayer pay for any insurance, the cost of my groceries, my ice, the cost of crew insurance, and they call this the free market. The edict from our state senators say you will maintain a timber industry functionally at all costs on the Tongass.
I grew up here. This was my favorite neighborhood, you might say, when I was a kid. I'd come up here. I remember being up on the mountaintop there, seeing 23 deer in a meadow one time. I went up the day before in a sleeping bag, woke up in the morning, and there's 23 deer down below me. You never see that anymore now. Large-scale logging came in and changed the ecology of the island a lot. The deer population has dropped so dramatically that there's not adequate population for even to supply the wolves to come back. So the deer population's down permanently and the wolf population's down permanently. So I miss the wolves. You know, when I was a kid, we'd hear them regularly all winter long. I wish for the old days, not just for me, but for people that come here. I wish they could see wildlife as it used to be. You know, that bothers me. I think from the beginning this should have been recognized as a jewel, you know, a jewel for humanity.
Just a few days ago, I attended a public meeting for the Central Tongass project, which is really a timber sale. People started going up to the testimony table, and there was a polycom sitting on the table. People were under the impression that their testimony was being recorded. After about 40 minutes of testimony, I raised my hand and said, "Is that recording?" And the acting forest supervisor said no. People are trying to be involved in the process, and this is the treatment they get. So it's pretty obvious that they don't really care what people have to say. If you oppose their viewpoint, then it is not valid. That's how they view it. It's a wasteland. It's just turned into wasteland. I've been here. I worked on the first timber sale for the Forest Service on the Lindenberg Peninsula, right in this area, 44 years ago. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because it was absolutely beautiful and pristine, and I had no idea what I was being a part of. I remember being on Mitchell Creek and just marveling at watching the salmon trying to get over the falls. I'd never seen that before. It was just world class and completely untouched in the middle of the wilderness. And now look at it.
Well, I look at a clear cut, and the stumps remind me of gravestones.
It's like I'm at a funeral and it's over. And there's nothing you can do to change it. But wait hundreds of years. And us humans don't have time.
After my experience in Australia, the government's betrayal of the Tongass did not surprise me. But I soon learned about something even more disturbing. I learned that the Tonga timber sale had been supported by the Southeast Alaska Conservation Council, an NGO claiming to be the environmental watchdog of the Tongass. That's where the real story began.
SEAC endorsed the Tonga timber sale and said it should be a working forest. The Tonga sale or project area should be a quote-unquote working forest. Working forest means logging, clear cut, loss of habitat. There's a public face to these organizations and there's a private face, and the private face was make it a working forest because we've got some deals to cut.
The foundations that were willing to fund the work up here said that they didn't want to fund litigation anymore. They didn't want to fund any forest defense. All they wanted to fund was trying to get more permanent protection. What came out of this was what was called the Permanent Protection Plan. These groups wanted to try to protect another 4 million acres of the Tongass, most of which was not threatened by anything at all. And the question is, how do you get 4 million acres of more protection in an area that already has millions and millions of acres of protection? Well, the only way you can do that is to throw other areas under the bus.
This came to a head when a native timber company called Sealaska started lobbying to exchange their marginal timberlands for some of the best stands of old-growth forests on the Tongass. The Southeast Alaska Conservation Council actually supported the legislation, which gave 70,000 acres of public forests to a timber company.
The Sealaska legislation was passed December 12, 2014, under the National Defense Authorization Act, under the Obama administration. And I remember, I was almost like remembering where you were when JFK was killed. I remember watching the vote on that.
I met a local pilot who volunteered to take me out to one of the areas that was privatized.
It was the most horrific thing I have seen in my entire life. I heard that there are 60,000 invertebrates in a single footprint in the Tongass. 60,000. How many footprints do you think that clearcut was? How many invertebrates lived in those soils? Those soils that are now pouring into salmon streams and poisoning the water. 1 trillion? 10 trillion? You think someone is fighting for what's right, but then you see Southeast Alaska Conservation Council working with Sealaska. And they're supposed to be the good guys. It's this crazy mess where, are there good guys?
They like to use terms, the trinket terms, and then they'll wear the fanciest of regalia and identify themselves to the land, and we're stewards of the land. This is what they claim Sealaska does. At the same time, they're exploiting everything they can. So they're not us. They don't talk to us, but they're in Washington, D.C., and they're at National Indian Education doings or congresses. They're there representing us all over the place, keeping the lines blurred from tribal existence to corporate existence.
They're not actually speaking up for the villages. We have like acres and acres of land, but we can't use it because it's their land, and if we get on their land and get in the way of making their money, but you don't hear about that kind of stuff. So.
For all the jobs that they say, oh, we must have this industry in here for all these jobs, all the money people are going to make, why is Alaska Natives the poorest in Alaska? Why do we have the worst living conditions? Why is our housing substandard, our education? Why are we high up on the suicide scale? Why do we have no reason to live, and why are we banned off of our own land? Because of the state of Alaska. That's why. They're the ones that hold our Alaska Native Claim Settlement in their hands, and they have used it to maximize themselves and to minimize us to where we don't have a political voice. It's an industrial act of Congress. It's not Native claims. It's not us. We never would do this to our land.
I was too. Right.
Vegetarian soup, anyway.
Right. Excellent.
Hello.
Well,
Okay.
thank you.
Be safe.
I'm comfortable with being fully exposed as a rather disorganized fellow. The problem that I see with the notion of collaboration is that it presumes that if we just tweak the dials on business as usual, we can have our cake and eat it too. And I think it was Einstein that said, you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem. I've got decades of history in these areas that, year by year, you watch favorite stands of timber get sacrificed to the marketplace.
How does that feel when you're seeing the place you love being destroyed and it's kind of irreversible?
There is a tremendous sense of loss, and I think to a certain extent a sense of guilt for having tried and failed against a system that is so fundamentally biased. Yeah, there's a sense of guilt that despite our best efforts, we lost. For the last 35 years, I've made a livelihood taking from intact ecosystems. And the other half of the year, I feel obligated to give back to the integrity of those intact ecosystems. Well, we're in the back bay of Port Protection and headed over to Labasher Bay. And we're going to investigate areas of this forest that have been appropriated by the Sea Alaska Corporation.
And how much did Sea Alaska select here?
9,000 acres. Wow. So everything that direction is Sea Alaska. These are the trees that have been storing the carbon for hundreds and hundreds of years. Some of these trees are probably 400 or 500 years old. And through all that time period, they have been sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it. And that's pretty important. This might be hard to capture on a camera, but the sense of, peace and well-being you get from being in this forest, it's kind of hard to describe. You're just kind of surrounded by all this life, and it's quiet, it's peaceful.
How do you feel about fighting for the Tongass? What's your motivation? What's it like for you doing it?
It's frustrating, and I would really, really love to not have to do it. Love it if we just had our peace. Peace in our land, on our land. That would be the ultimate goal. But we're so far away from it, I don't think I'll ever see it in my lifetime.
It's a perfect storm right now of the industry's attempt to get at the best of the rest timber. There's about 60,000 acres at imminent risk right now. The Prince of Wales Landscape Level Analysis, and I call it its sister timber sale, the Central Tongass project. And then we have the so-called landless legislation. So-called landless natives from 5 communities in Petersburg, Wrangell, Ketchikan, Haines, and Teneke will be allowed to select 23,000 acres apiece or 115,000 acres. And if history's any guide, the large majority of that will end up being clear-cut. And then we have the Alaska Mental Health Trust Land Exchange, where Lisa Murkowski got, I think it was 21 or 22,000 acres of federal land to be exchanged with the Mental Health Trust. People are probably pretty confused. The Mental Health Trust, what does that have to do with logging? Well, that's how they fund their programs. Their timber division logs, and they export in the round right out of the country. A portion of that is going to be at an area called Lease Lakes. There was already a 4,000 acre clear cut to the nubbin, and now directly adjacent to that, they got 8,000 acres. So there'll be 12,000 acres that have been clear cut.
The forest is so silent.
Before we left Alaska, climate change gave us one last gut punch.
Wow. It's over. If the Tongass looks like this, then it's over. Holy hell.
The hot, dry summer had weakened the rainforest and allowed a small bug called the hemlock sawfly to flourish. In some areas, 3 out of every 4 trees were dead.
My name's Joe Sebastian. What's the date today?
It is
September 16th, 2019. We're here in Point Baker in my wife and I's house. It used to be maybe one story a month about climate change. Every couple of months a story about climate change, but now it's a different story every single day. And not just a little story about a single bird species going extinct. It's a story about Antarctic ice sheet breaking in half, or on the Greenland ice sheet, rivers pouring off the ice sheet in waterfalls. It's like a Stephen King movie, the slow motion disaster overtaking the human race. And it's so slow, you know, you can't ignore it to a certain degree, but it's overtaking us.
You know, you look at the hillsides here, what could be more dramatic than that? Here you've got a green forest that's been green for thousands of years, just like that, and now it's brown the last few years. What does that tell you? It'll tell you it's time to change, you know.
Do you think we will be able to act in time?
Well, the time is now. And I don't see much happening, so I guess the answer would be no.
It's going to be hard. You know, it's not going to be like what I had. It's like right now we're living in the most biologically lush planet that's ever going to be here.
They're right, the trees do grow back, but the forest does not grow back. It's a feeling of loss, and you know, if it stopped, okay, well, maybe we can carry on and try to repair what's been damaged, but it's not stopping. It's just continuing, and it's getting worse. It's almost like before it all goes down the toilet, they're going to make sure they got every last one down on the ground. But we can't seem to stop ourselves. We're like, you know, serial rapists. We got to keep raping the forest over and over and over again. And the society just can't seem to get it together to stop them.
What do you think the world will look like when I'm your age?
Oh, gee, that's... all I could say is I'm sorry. You folks have a big obligation on your shoulders, and it's your voices that's going to make the changes. It's not going to be mine. It's on your shoulders. And we didn't do such a good job for you folks.
Got to wake up. We have to stop cutting our forest. We have to start realizing that they are our only hope for the future. I mean, I know the future for my children isn't going to be the future I had. I've already encouraged both of them to get out of fishing because I don't see that it's got a really rosy future. But I hope that there's enough of a planet left that, you know, there'll be something.
And that light rain and fog. 55 degrees. Wind south at 9 miles an hour. Elbert Rock, 53 degrees. Wind south at 19 knots, gusting to